Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to a very special episode number 100 of the Focus and Chill podcast. Joey and I have been at it for over 2 years now. We've had a lot of guests come on the show, quite a few of interviews of each other, and we thought we would take this opportunity to reflect on everything that we've learned both from guests and from our own experiences in the last 2.5 years. So we were talking before about some of the things we learned, and Joey, you had a few concepts you wanted to start off with, and I had a few that I wanted to explore too. Do you want to begin with your ideas of what has come up for you recently?
Yeah, sure. Wow, 100 episodes. Congratulations, Jez.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One thing I've noticed in my routine that's been different from 2022 when we first started this is the concept of Ultradian rhythms. So that is like 90-minute rhythms in your day where you have a peak of focus and then you need some time to come out of it. The rhythm that in which I set up my day has changed slightly. I think back then I probably would have been like, hey, I need to get this stuff done. Like block out the morning, block out the afternoon, get it done. These days I structure it such that I go 90 minutes, half-hour break, 90 minutes, half-hour break. And the half-hour break will hopefully be something where I'm not looking at a screen. There's that every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. But I think there's also something that says every 90 minutes, it's less catchy, but it's like every 90 minutes, take half an hour. And let your eyesight go to panorama. That's been one of the rhythms that I've tried to program throughout my day. Are you doing anything similar with your day?
I haven't intentionally set it up like that, but I do notice that it came from the book, The Power of Full Engagement, where they popularized that concept. And the first starting point is the idea of energy management versus time management, that actually in 90 minutes, if you do it right, you can probably achieve a full morning's work. The thing that I wonder about is the Pomodoro technique, which we both like a lot. The thing that I always found interesting with that is 25 minutes felt a bit too short for me. And I think Huberman has spoken about this as well in the context of Ultradian rhythms, that it doesn't really make sense in the context of how human attention works, that ideally it would be a bit longer. But do you have any thoughts on that in terms of Pomodoro technique and the 90-minute blocks? Would you use both together or would you use longer blocks?
I use both together. It's mainly to accommodate my eyesight as well. So the idea is that I still use that 20-second, 20 feet away every 20 minutes rule. And that gets incorporated into my Pomodoro, but it's not quite 20 minutes, more like 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes, I just have little stretching snacks. I might get down and stretch out my feet and my toes, and I might do a dead hang from my bar or something like that, just for a minute, and then come back to it. And there, I do find some resistance because I think once you get going, you don't want to stop. So it is kind of like I'm hearing my Pomodoro chiming away and I'm just like, shut up, I just want to work. But I think long-term, my eyesight will thank me. But I think also depends on what you're working on as well. Like if it's a programming thing and you're trying to work out why this thing isn't doing what it's supposed to. And if you're like me, you just want to keep hacking away at it because like, you always feel like you're one line of code deletion or adding away from solving it. Often that little pause is what all that it takes to refresh. So that's the way it plays out for me. How about you? Do you combine them or do you use them separately?
Yeah, I do a very similar thing. I've got Focus Pair set up with every 25 minutes, not exactly at that time. The way it works is it waits for a window of 4 seconds of keyboard inactivity, which is a point where I might be staring out the window and there's a natural point of inattention. And then it will ask me to take a break. I'll go and do some push-ups or some squats or hang from the bar, things like that. And it really does make a difference. It's so paradoxical as well because it feels like I just need to keep forcing my way through the brick wall and I'll get there. But I almost invariably find that when I take that short break, I end up having an insight and then it's much easier to break through after that.
Yeah.
The thing that I've found indispensable there is to write down what I was just doing so that I don't forget because I can completely lose sight of what I was working on and then have a new idea of something else that I could be doing instead. So I have to write down where I got up to before, and then it makes it easier to continue.
Good call. Where do you write it down?
It's within Focus Bear. It's got a prompt for that, but also I've got a paper notebook that I use and I'll write down micro tasks there.
Nice one.
But I've found that the challenge for me in the last couple of years is my days have been increasingly filled with meetings. It's quite unusual to have a 90-minute block. I love it when I get a morning where I don't have to worry about talking to people and I can actually do a full session. But I miss the days of when I was more of an individual programmer and I could just basically have the whole day and code the whole day. And then it was easier to implement these kind of tactics. I guess it's that thing about the maker schedule versus the manager schedule. But then the other side of that is it can be a bit of a cop out. I was looking through some of the notes from our earlier episodes, and Amanda Horswell talked about being busy, where you're working very hard, but not necessarily working on the hard things. And that's something that I've been aware of recently, where I've got to a point in the last couple of weeks where I've been so busy that it has felt like I haven't had time to do my evening routine ritual of planning the next day and reprioritizing my to-do list. And that's very dangerous because it becomes a vicious cycle of then the next day I haven't had time to reprioritize. So I end up working on the squeaky wheel tasks rather than the things that actually need to be done. Does that ever happen to you, that you get things backing up so much that it's very hard to figure out what is actually the most important thing?
Definitely. Just to clarify for the listeners what the squeaky wheel tasks might be, the squeaky wheel tasks are probably the ones that are shouting at you the loudest, but not the most important. They'll probably be the most urgent, but not necessarily the most important. I can tell you that sometimes when, like I just came back from Sri Lanka, my first overseas trip for a while. It's been the first time I've been sharing space with people living space with people for a while because I live by myself. A lot of my habits have gone out the window. And so we're probably talking about the space of maybe about 3 weeks between taking off and then coming back home. It's been a process of like realizing how much my fundamentals rates for my sense of mental wealth. But then because I'm such a habit stacker, when some of the keystone habits don't get done, the entire stack can fall down. Like you were talking about, it's a bit of a vicious cycle, albeit slightly a different one, where if I'm not journaling as much, I'm not reflecting as much. And if I'm not reflecting as much, I'm less aware of how I'm showing up, which means that I'm less motivated to journal and reflect and improve. I guess where the parallels are is initially I was finding it difficult to go, okay, I haven't thought about what my habit stack is for a while because it's been literally habitual, right? So I'm not thinking about it. But yeah, like now in March, my goal is to try to get myself back to my A game. What is that first habit that you put down that you can stack everything else onto? For me, it's like morning and evening journaling. And from there, I can build things from there. So yeah, but I guess in terms of the process of working out which thing to focus on first, do you have any heuristics that you like to go to break that sense of overwhelm?
The approach that normally works is to spend quite a lot of time working through my paper notes. I've got Trello. I showed Joey my Trello at one point, and it's just my dumping ground where if I have ideas that don't seem very urgent, I put them in there. It's not really relevant for my week-to-week planning. Instead, I've got the things that are most urgent on my wall. Because one thing that helps in terms of heuristics is I have a weekly call with a friend every Sunday night where we have an accountability session. We start with a 5-minute body doubling session to plan out our week. We'll both be sitting there writing out what we're going to do. And we'll come up with the things that are most important from that perspective. And that is helpful. But the challenge is then if I'm interstate, like has happened a bit, or if I'm traveling and that list isn't nearby, then I can forget about what the priorities are.
Yeah.
Or it can feel like things changing so much, or I might have forgotten something on Sunday that actually seems even more important than those other things. But it comes down to I 100% need to spend ideally 20 minutes per evening going through and looking at my notepad, writing it out again and figuring out these are the top 3 things for me to accomplish today. And then having the realization that I don't actually have time to do anything apart from that. So I need to not quite eat that frog, but figure out how to make those tasks bite-sized enough that I can start on them.
Yeah, that's often a tricky one. For me, I'm often just like, I just want to get into it and start working rather than just like thinking about, okay, what's the first thing? And the harder question is, what does the end state look like? Then just trying to work from there, because that's something we need to do when we're planning how long something's going to take or estimates and things like that. Just to rewind to what you were saying, Jez, about the Trello boards and the paper notebook. Is the paper notebook your main collector at the moment, or do you still have the Trello boards?
I use the Trello board occasionally. What I've done now, don't know if this will work. I'll show you my new dumping ground.
Okay.
I've got a paper inbox.
Oh, nice. So,
3 areas. The first area is the relatively urgent stuff, which needs to be looked at within the next 2 weeks. The second category where maybe I should look at it in the next quarter. And then this section is the really long-term ideas. It's working for me at the moment. I don't think it would work for everyone. I like the tactileness of paper, but I'm also very intrigued about the Remarkable notebook. You use your phone with a stylus. I think that experience could be helpful for me because it is easier to process it if it's already in digital form and you don't have to worry about losing it.
yeah, I guess the thing with my phone is that I used to do just purely handwriting on my phone. I've recently gone to more of a hybrid solution, which is I will do handwriting when it comes to stream of consciousness and my gratitude journal. But when it comes to my daily log or looking at how the day went, I will do that in the more searchable text, like what you'd enter on your keyboard kind of thing. And so that's been mainly for searchability, and also because it's less tiring to write by hand. Usually my daily logs now are probably the heaviest part of my journaling practice. And that's where I just basically have a blow by blow. I woke up at 7 and started journaling and then got cracking at work at like 8:05. It is fairly granular. And I found that writing that out by hand was actually hurting my hand a bit. So I tried a few things like just typing it out and also trying voice to text as well. I go in and out of doing that. That's kind of what I've been doing recently. But yeah, I think doing it digitally for me is the best way to go. Like I know a lot of people are just like, no, it's just not the same if you don't have paper and pen. Then you also ask them, okay, but how often are you journaling? And I said, oh, like whenever I remember my paper and pen. And it's just like, okay, well, I guess the decision is between doing your paper and pen journaling intermittently versus possibly doing your digital journaling regularly because you always got your phone with you. It could be both, right? Yeah.
I always make sure I have my paper and pen with me.
Very good, Jez. Good.
So your daily log is almost like a timesheet?
It's a mixture of timesheets, emotions. It's kind of like facts, feelings, stories from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, really.
And do you do it as you go or at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, I had thought about maybe doing it as I go, because when my battery is quite low. It does feel like a bit of a hurdle at the end of the day. Like my evening wind down consists of yoga, journaling, and meditation. The yoga is generally the hardest thing. When I start the journaling, I'm just like, oh, cool. It's just writing. Sitting at my desk and writing. I can do that. But then when I'm up till 6 p.m. on the daily log, yeah, I'm so excited, right? It's just like, oh, this is so long. But once I've done it, I feel fairly satisfied. And then when I get to meditation is relatively easy because I'm just like sitting down and watching my thoughts. Yeah, but it is a little bit tough.
Yeah. But then do you crunch that for insights and figure out
Yeah.
what activities bring you joy and where you can improve things?
It's not necessarily the lens that I apply to it. I definitely crunch them for insights at the end of the week, but it's more from the perspective of during the week, I might set certain experiments I want to try, think like ways that I want to pivot so that I can meet where I want to be at. Those things translate to daily reminders, which is just like a OneNote of 3 simple things that I'm looking out for in my day. When I'm going through the daily log, I'm looking for these things. I'm looking for convergence and divergence from my values. For instance, I went on a podcast and talked about something vulnerable that converges with my value of courage and bravery. And so I'd make a little note next to that so that when it comes to my weekly review, it's very easy to pull out and doesn't take as long. Otherwise, I will be reading the daily log line by line, which takes a long time, but sometimes it's worth it.
Could you share an example of where doing the daily log has led to an insight for you?
Oh, Jez, that's a tough question. I can't, I'm on the spot. I've got stage fright. I can't come up with that at the moment. And so, yeah, maybe, yeah.
In our next no guest episode, we'll.
Oh, yeah, maybe next no guest episode. I can also provide a link in the show notes because every month I provide those insights in my newsletter. I can provide a link to the newsletter and the subscribe link if anyone feels motivated to learn more.
Yeah, the subscribe link is always in the show notes. I read your newsletter today and it made me think about something. You were talking about the sunk cost fallacy. If I arrived in my current position by chance, would it make sense to continue it? I was pondering that today.
Is there a decision that you can't talk about?
I was thinking about, is that a question that is meaningful for me? I was thinking more with the projects that I'm involved in. I guess the point you were making, you talked about a 2014 product that you were developing and you had a decision whether to kill it, to persevere or to pivot. I have to have that decision quite regularly with Focus Bear about whether to pivot or persevere. There's a few different decision-making criteria that I need to have in place. But I think the one for me was, if I had complete freedom over my time and I could do whatever I wanted, would I still continue what I'm doing right now? For some areas of my life, the answer is probably no, but I have to do it because I need to earn money. And then other things where I really do find intrinsic enjoyment in it. I wonder if there's something like that in the questions to ask. I'd like ideally to have my life more propelled by intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. That would probably be the decision-making point for me.
Do you find a sense of empowerment from this question? Let's say there's a project where it doesn't bring you much joy, it doesn't bring you much intrinsic motivation, but it is something that you use to put food on the table. Let's say that's the conclusion you come to. Is that, I guess, do you find that to be an empowering conclusion or a disempowering conclusion? How do you feel?
I find it an incomplete conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The question is probably then, okay, I accept that I need to work in a job, and then I have the choice of, do I make it into something where, because I've got this judgment now that I'm only doing it for the money, does that then actually kill the joy of the experience? Can I reframe it and come up with ways of, how can I learn from this experience? How can I enjoy it? I have definitely gone through phases. One is my honors year, where I really enjoyed it in the beginning, and then I was getting to the stage where I was hating it and counting down the days until it was over. I had a thought then that that's probably not the right way. Ideally, it's not torture to go through this process. It is hard, but there's probably another way to see it.
Yeah, I think those reframes that you're applying are really useful because you're seeing the choice where a lot of people might feel like their hands are tied. I think it might have been a Huberman episode. I can't remember which one, but he'll say that one of the great mindsets you can have is cultivating gratitude and stories of high agency. The low agency story you might tell yourself is, I've got no choice here. I need to take this job to put food on the table. That's a low agency story. A high agency story would be like, you know what? There's many ways I can put food on the table. This is the way I'm choosing to put food on the table at the moment because I can use my skills in this. It pays much better than other options that I have. So it means I need to work less. I need to work in it for like not as long in order to put food on the table, maybe. And so, yeah, I think you're seeing those choices is really useful for having that mindset that can possibly bring intrinsic motivation if you cultivate it enough and you tell yourself that story.
Yeah. And it also means that I can then come up with little adjustments to work to make it more enjoyable. With my current day job, I can approach it in a way where it's not very fun and it's quite by the book, and I'm just writing product requirements documents all day, and I don't really enjoy that very much. Or I can add a little bit of flair into it and creativity, and then suddenly, actually, it's quite fun to do it. So that's the other aspect.
I'll put you on the spot, Jez. Like, so tell us a bit about your flair and creativity.
Oh, well, I've given this example a few times where it's doing comics for my product requirements documents. Nice. But then the other one that is meaningful for me is doing things the long way in a different way.
Okay.
So, for example, there was a time where I had drawn a diagram on paper and taken a photo of it. My manager said, "Can you please put that in Miro?" It would have taken me probably 5 minutes to type out the diagram into Miro. But instead, I spent an hour and a half writing a script to take the photo of it and used an LLM to generate the diagram. I was talking about this with you the other day, that it didn't get the topography correct, and so things weren't linked. But it was a task that I really didn't want to do, and I don't think I would have done it, even though it didn't take that long, if I'd done it the short way. And sometimes I have to do things like that where it's a longer way, but it has some novelty injected into it. It also means that next time I have to do that task, I just have to run the script.
I guess it touches on like a really interesting philosophical question of like, what do we put on this earth to do, right? Are we here to do things the most efficient but boring, lifeless way? Or are we here to take the scenic route and have fun? But, you know, the thing might take at least 10 times as long in your case. Yeah, like, what does a good life look like exactly?
Yeah. And then there's the XKCD comic of the optimization trap, where there's the example of there's this repetitive process that I'm having to do every day and it's really boring. So I'm going to instead write code or create a robot to do it for me. And there is a sweet spot where I think a 10 times ratio doesn't make sense if I only do it once per year. But if I'm doing it every week, then it makes sense.
When you say it doesn't make sense, you mean the optimization doesn't make sense if you're doing it only once a year.
Yeah. From a strict Homus economicus perspective, where a person will always do the most important thing in a linear order, and task desirability doesn't come into it at all. But I think for my brain, I really have to balance that. An example that is very pertinent right now is my expense claim. I went to India for work in January, and I've got about $1,500 worth of expenses to claim back. It would take me maybe 45 minutes to do it, but I haven't actually sat down and done it. It should be really easy. That's basically what I'm talking about here, that there are some tasks which they are actually probably not that hard and they don't take that long if I do it the boring way, but I find it very hard to will myself to do it when I've got many other competing demands.
And now I'm really curious, what does the scenic route look like for doing that task, and how long do you expect it will take you? Like 5 weeks or something?
The approach that I will end up taking is to do it in bite-sized chunks. I have gotten a little bit out of my bookkeeping routine when I am not training interns, which is something that has been occupying a lot of my time for the last 2 weeks. I normally have time to do financial admin in the early evening, and I catch up with my Xero bookkeeping and do things like expense claims. So I guess essentially the reason I haven't done it is because the time block has not been available because other things have consumed it. But
That
I'm
makes
hoping that
sense.
from next week I'll have some time.
Next week you'll be less busy, right?
Yeah, I'll report back on the next podcast.
Very good. Oh, geez, I like the accountability in this podcast.
I'm a little bit screwed because we already recorded episode 101 before this one. But episode 102, you'll hear an answer from me about whether I did it or not.
Oh, I thought you meant the next no guest episode. We'll talk about it, but yeah.
That one too. Hopefully it won't take that long.
Excellent.
All right. The other things that I had in terms of concepts that people had talked about, one of them that I've heard people talk about, I'm not sure whether it has been on this podcast or more informal conversations, is the idea of changing location in order to get certain work done. I know that when we had Anita on as one of our earlier episodes, she talked about how she has her cave set up and then her cathedral set up, depending on the type of work. That can be really helpful. I haven't really experimented with that, but one thing I've found interesting is while I've been traveling, I've been on planes, and you can technically get Wi-Fi on planes now, but I'm not going to pay for that. I think
Yep.
it's actually the one area of zero connectivity that I regularly or semi-regularly encounter, and I don't want to spoil that. I found it works incredibly well for me. In my flights to India, for example, back and forth, I read over 50 academic papers, quite dense papers, and I was just reading them, not doing anything else for 10 hours at a stretch.
Wowzers.
And
Solid.
I don't get that opportunity normally when I'm at home because I've got tons of meetings to attend. I think there's also something contextual about being in that environment that I've set myself up in advance by telling myself this is an amazing time to be able to do that type of work. It tends to work well. But I also recognize that it's not really a scalable strategy. There was a book I read once by a guy who talked about how he wrote his book by booking a flight to Japan for the express purpose of writing. He flew to Japan and then flew back and wrote the book in the 24 hours while he was on the plane. And I think that's a little bit irresponsible from both a environmental sustainability perspective and also from a wealth perspective, that this guy
Yeah.
has a lot of money and he can afford to do that. And it's not a strategy that everyone can employ.
That's true. Just for the listeners, that cave and cathedral strategy is the idea that when we're in places with high or no ceilings, we tend to have more lateral, like diffuse thoughts. And then when we're in caves, so places that have fairly low ceilings or feel very confined, or like kind of like dark, dank basements, those areas seem to be very conducive to analytical or focused thought. That's what you're getting at, right, Jess?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and I pretty much ignore it in the way I design my setup. What you see at the moment is where I do my podcast recording, like what you're seeing right now. Everything from auditing my finances, which is a very dry analytical task, to writing my newsletters and my books, which is more of a lateral task, doing my networking, playing video games, sometimes watching TV. In terms of where I exist, it's probably my bed, this chair, and maybe the walk around the block, walk around nature, and also working out. That's me.
But the walking around nature part, that's probably the cathedral time.
That's true. Yeah.
Lane Cove National Park is a pretty beautiful place. There
Yeah.
aren't many ceilings in that area.
That's true. Yeah. That's a
Up
good
with
point.
a canopy. Because that's probably the ultimate version of it too. I find that I often will get really interesting novel thoughts when I'm out running or walking along the foreshore trail, looking out over the sea near my house. That's probably the way that I implement it, because I don't tend to change workspaces apart from I go to a co-working space. So that's the change there. But I guess the thing that I was touching on before with the plane is maybe there's something about it is almost like a cave. But I think the main thing there is not having connectivity. and being in motion, because I find I get the same experience on trains as well, on long distance trips. And I was thinking after doing that trip of how can I create that experience more regularly without having to pay for a plane trip.
I sold my car in 2010 and I haven't driven regularly since. I get around by public transport quite a lot. And I find that sometimes I'm actually looking forward to getting onto public transport because that's my time where I tend to go to my reading list, like all the articles where I've had one skim through it and I want to what's called do a slow read through it. So there'll be time where all I can do is sit down and either look out the window or spend some quality time with my phone. I think that's the way I probably implement it in my life. I guess the only thing is that it's not regular. So I don't commute to an office or anything like that. I don't have that regular cave time in that respect. Do you still commute, Jess? I can't remember.
I do when I go into the co-working space. So
Got it.
I went there today and it's a 1 hour and 20 minutes. I tend to actually use it for a combination of meditation and journaling on my way in, and then on my way back. Today I had meetings, but some days I'll use it for my planning time.
Yeah. And I think the co-working space is an interesting one, right? Because some people might use it as a cave and some people might use it as a cathedral. It can be a cathedral in that you're with a whole bunch of other people. You can talk, have conversations that will engage that more diffuse lateral mode of thinking. Some people might see their homes more like a cathedral because they live with people or they've got like a whole bunch of distractions that interfere with their narrow focus, and they go to the co-working space to have that cave time. So for you, it sounds like it's more of a cathedral space. Is that right?
Yeah, because I've got people that I'm working with there. I don't tend to be able to get much focused work done while I'm there, but that's okay. I know why I'm going.
Yeah. I think having that intention is good. I've got a friend, she's a writer, and she's much like that guy that takes flights to Japan. She just gets up and goes places. She even went to Brisbane just for the sole purpose of finding a different tree to write under so that she could write. And she does it to her credit. But like you said, there's possibly a more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah. Another way of looking at those situations is the Julia Cameron approach of going on artist dates. I could go somewhere within my city that I haven't been to before, or just take my paper notebooks out into the forest somewhere. There's a really nice spot where I'm looking out over the sea, and I sometimes go and meditate there. I haven't actually tried going there with my notebooks, but that would probably be a perfect experience, apart from the risk of losing the bits of paper because the wind might blow them away.
That is always a risk with analog, isn't it? I guess it's a risk with digital as well. Like if it slips out of your hand, it's all gone, isn't it? If your phone slips out of your hand.
Yeah. Well, before the phone slips out of your hand from listening to this episode, we'll begin to wrap it up. We normally do 45-minute episodes. So just summing up, we are very grateful to have been able to be your hosts for 100 episodes, and look forward to having many more. If you have a guest you'd suggest or a topic you think we should cover, let us know in the comments. We don't get many comments yet, but maybe we'll start getting them from episode 100.
Yeah, well, here's to 100 more.
Yep. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.